Always a fun topic, fear, and I thought I'd approach it in a couple of ways. I'm going to talk a little bit about what it is, what goes on in our body, in our minds, with fear, and then I'll share some actual examples of some of my time training with the Yamabushi monks in northern Shanghai in Japan. It was a pretty extreme experience. So I did master training there, and a big part of what they do is they put us into all kinds of situations that are quite scary, that definitely trigger different types of fear, which is interesting because fear has different flavors. So I'll give you guys a little bit of insight on that. A good place to start with fear is understanding it as, an emotion, and what does it feel like in the body. So we have our nervous system, which many of you heard me speak about before, and we only have two particular states that we can be in. We're either in the fight, flight, and freeze state, which is also known as the sympathetic state, or we're in the rest and recovery flow state, parasympathetic state. So it's either one or the other. We don't have a third state or a fourth state. We only have these two variations on the theme. And fear, unsurprisingly, is in the fight, flight, and freeze state. So fear, when we're fearful, moves us into that state. And it's obviously incredibly helpful when there is an imminent threat or a concerning issue in the context of what's going on within our own lives or our own challenges. So we don't want to step away from fear in any way, because it is there to protect us principally. And of course, 200,000 years on the planet, fear has been really helpful, but it's also quite a hindrance, because the body that we're in, the vehicle that we're traveling in right now, although this is the 21st century, all of its genetics are still built like it was 500 years ago or 5,000 years ago. So it doesn't understand the differences really between fear, as in the fear of losing my job, or the fear of catching COVID, or the fear of losing a loved one, versus the real and present imminent threat of, being attacked 500 years ago in my village and being killed. So it only has a binary view. It either says, is this fear? Yes, it is. If it is, let's go into fight, flight, and freeze, and let's prepare to do one of those three things. If it isn't, let's go into rest, relax, recover, calm, flow state, not a problem. So once fear arrives, it goes into the fight, flight, and freeze camp. And it's no different to discomfort. It's no different to, stress. It's no different to an unease in my body. All of these things are all very much looking and feeling like fear. And it was funny, I was swimming this morning, and one of the guys I swim with, Ken Bingley, is often on the calls, and I see Ken most days, and he took a photograph of me as I was going into the water. I'll actually be able to show you guys the photograph. And I had no idea that he was standing behind me. But the funny thing was, I didn't even know I do this. So when I'm getting into the water, I don't like getting into cold water. There's no two ways about that. It's not the place that I want to go to first thing in the morning. But I know, it's good for me to do. But I didn't realize that just before I kind of dive in, I have a kind of a moment where I take a deep breath in, and then I dive in. And he actually, captured that on camera, if you can see it. Now that looks like I'm kind of going, roar! It couldn't be further from the truth, right? That is me going, and then I'm going into the water. Because no matter how adept I am at getting into that cold water, no matter how much I know that cold water isn't going to kill me, it's still just not nice when I hit the water. So I can't control the autonomic response. I can't control the way that my body reacts. My body just basically says, oh, this is definitely a threat to life, puts it into the fight, flight, and freeze response. So it's like there's a tightness within all of my body, and I have to breathe. So I know that I'm going, and then I'm in and I'm breathing. And for the first, I would say, maybe 10 seconds of being in the water, I'm still in that kind of fearful state. And then as I breathe and breathe and breathe, then my nervous system moves from fight, flight, and freeze into rest and recover. And I'm fine. And I'm breathing. And it's no issue. And I've been swimming in cold water for years, but I can't change it because that's just the way my body's always going to react when it goes into cold water. Now, for a lot of people, when they go into cold water, their body continues to react like that. But my body's done it enough now that it goes, oh yeah, this is okay. We know this isn't going to kill us, so we can now relax and move through it. And I've mentioned it before, but it's the whole idea of why bother going into cold water. So a lot of people will go swimming in the morning because it helps with their anxiety, or it helps with their stress, or they're going through a difficult time in their life, and they find either community in sea swimming, or they find benefit from being in the cold water. Because to be frank, if you want to feel present and get out of your busy mind, hop into cold water, and it's like, boom, I'm present. I've got nowhere else to go except noticing that I'm flipping freezing cold and I'm here. So there's some great wellness reasons around it. But I don't swim because I feel anxious. I don't swim because I have anything going on at home. Thankfully, touch wood, my life at home is very nice. My world is fine. There's nothing going on. I don't have any anxiety. I don't have any stress. I don't have depression. I wake up in the morning, I meditate, I do my morning routine, and then I go, okay, I'm going to go and get into the cold water. But before I go into cold water, I'm going to do some chin-ups and press-ups, and I hate them. It's like the last place on the planet I want to go when I wake up in the morning. But I know I need to do this like a little bit for my physical body, but it also feels like unease. It's unpleasant, and that unease, that unpleasantness in my body also feels like fear. And when I start to wake up in the morning and I meditate before I do any of that, I wake up and I think, I'm going to meditate now and do other stuff and go down and have a nice coffee, and I feel fine, because that's also unease. I also have to just push myself along. It's like a little shunt. Okay, go and meditate. And today's meditation was a great example of why you just keep showing up. It was horrible. It was just hard. It was 23 minutes of an absolute struggle from beginning to end. I didn't have a moment where my mind stopped wandering. I didn't have any great sense of, this is good at any point through it. It was literally sit down, focus on my breath, mind wanders, focus on my breath, mind wanders, focus on breath, constantly. So that was unpleasant. So then I think, that didn't go great. Then I got up, do my stretching, do, push-ups, hate them, but do it, feel uneasy. And then I think, okay, I'm going to go to the cold water. I don't need to, but I'm going to go. And I'm going in and I'm in cold water. And then there's that moment of fear. My body's going, and I'm going in. But what I'm doing is I'm starting my day reminding myself, my mind and my body, hey, we're not afraid to move towards fear. We're not afraid to lean into an issue when it arrives. We're not immediately withdrawing from whatever comes. We're happy to say, it's here, and I'm going to move towards it. I'm going to move towards the discomfort. I'm going to move towards the pain. I'm going to move towards the fear. And when we're developing a meditation practice and we look at the language that we use as teachers in the body scan, which is the foundation of teaching Vipassana meditation, we say to people, notice the shoulder and sense any tension that you might have in the shoulder or tightness. And if you feel comfortable, move towards the tension, move towards the pain, and then rest your awareness in that tightness and that tension. And then just allow the breath to settle as you rest inside that. And we say that because we want people to start noticing, oh, there's a pain there. And what we normally do is, I'll take a painkiller, or I'll try and shake it out and distract myself to get away from it. But what we want to teach is, what happens if I actually move towards that pain? So if I settle into the pain and I rest within it and I breathe, what happens is it dissipates. It actually starts to settle and not be as bad. Now, it might be a difficult pain and it might go on a bit, but like all the hard things that we're frightened of or fearful in life, it's never as bad as you perceive it to be before you step into it. Never. Even if you think of the most horrendous things that happened to you in the past, in the lead up to, you're like, how will I possibly cope with this event when it arrives? Like, I knew my son was going to die. I had 3 weeks notice because we knew he was dying and I knew it was going to happen. So I had challenging moments thinking, my God, what's it going to be like when I get to that moment? How will I cope? How will I support my wife? But actually, when I got there, it just felt okay and it was fine. And I was able to be present to it. And as it passed, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. Of course, it was horrible to lose my son, but the perception of me not being able to cope settled and stepped away. Of course I can cope. Like all of you and all of us through our lives, when we really have to face a significant challenge, we have this immense capacity to be there for ourselves, even when we don't believe it. So the idea within our meditation is to move towards the pain, to move towards the fear. So the idea in the morning time is, I move towards the discomfort. I move towards the fear. I go down and I get into cold water. And even then, when I've got into the cold water, I usually swim out. I'm not recommending this, but I swim out to a distance where I'm moving far enough away from everybody that, again, I start to feel a little bit of discomfort. This is now slightly edgy and it's a little bit outside of my control. So my body's kind of going, okay, be careful. And I'm watching where the current is. I'm thinking where I am. So I'm navigating between the nervous system. It's one part of my body's going, retreat, get back. And I'm going, no, I'll move forward. And the idea of me with my hands up to jump into the water or pushing myself into another space of discomfort in the sea is also something that I learned when I built and sold businesses and worked in the city of London. Fortune favors the brave. That expression is because when you learn in anything in life, when you learn that as the fear comes, you step into it, you also realize it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. And when you do that a few times, you also start to realize this is like a secret weapon, because most people, as soon as fear arrives, the body goes retreat. And the reason why it does that is for the last 200,000 years, we as a race on the planet have continued to procreate and grow because we don't take excessive risks. So we focus on what is our real needs: to feed ourselves, to shelter ourselves, and to procreate. So our nervous system is designed not to put us to a point where we take risks, because the genetic imprint within the human being is to make more human beings so we don't become extinct. So when you then say, well, how about I ignore that and the sense that arrives in my body, I say, okay, that might be the case, but I'm going to go in anyway. I'm going to take a breath. I'm going to push past it. And the whole idea of fortune favors the brave is that you start to realize that most businesses fail, most professional athletes fail, most successful people in the media or stars, etc., fail because there is a point, there's a threshold when they think, I'm not good enough, I'm going to get found out here, I need to get back. And what is that? That's fear speaking to them. It's using whatever narrative best triggers them to get back. It's like me going further out into the sea. Current's bad here, if I get caught, I'm going to die. Heart rate rises, I really sense it, I have to breathe, and I push it a little bit further. We are always predisposed to avoid fear at all costs, to step away from the challenge. So if you think about meditation, if you think about cold water, if you think about chin-ups and push-ups and stuff I hate, one of the big reasons I do it is because I show my mind and my body, when fear comes, let's embrace it. Because at some point during my day, there will be an event. There will be a bad text message or an email about something that's gone wrong in my business or my personal life or the world or the economy or something that will trigger me. And I'll read it and I'll get that. And then my body will go, oh yeah, it's okay. Let's breathe through it. Okay, let's navigate what this is. And if you've been on the 21-day meditation challenge on my YouTube channel, you'll have come across the inflatable crash helmet. And the reason why we meditate is that we're like, we blow it up, so that when the fear moment comes, we're ready. And instead of it being boom and it knocks you out, it's and it hits the side of our inflatable crash helmet. The event still comes, I can't stop it, but it doesn't consume me in the way that fear is set out to do that, if that makes sense. And I'll just give you a couple of examples of what it was like with the Yamabushi and how they tested us around fear and then what we learned during our time there. If anybody wants to ask a question before I go on to that.
Hi, John here. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, got you, perfect.
Sorry. All right. I understand exactly what the fear thing is now, having catastrophized during my recent bout of depression. As I told you before, I'm a bit of a daredevil. I scuba dive, I motor race, I cycle, I play football, bad golf. I've driven up and down to Donegal yesterday. I'm back working again full time on sport, and it's pretty hectic. But I'm enjoying it all. But the real fear came in with catastrophizing and losing all of that, which was pretty frightening. But I do have I had that ability to, and there were kind of anchors as well, to do crazy stuff like motor race at Modelo and compete in the European Rallycross Championships and go scuba diving and things like that. I don't have any fear of that kind of stuff. So it came as a major, major surprise when I got massive fear in the catastrophization, and it's switched off that catastrophizing fear. I hope nobody ever gets it because it's awful. But I understand where the fear element comes from, and that moment where just before you dive in, you go, oh, this may hurt, or this is going to be whatever. But it's the moment you actually get in, you start the race, or you dive off the side of the boat and you're finally in. That's one of the best feelings at all. But just that moment before you do it, it's like going on stage or doing a presentation, which I do as well. You get that build up and that anxiety inside you, but it also, to me, keeps you focused as well. Having that kind of anxiety, if you can control it, it can work very much to your advantage. But when it gets beyond that, the catastrophization level, well, then you get into real trouble.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, if you think about public speaking, you know, I do presentations at the moment online. It's super chat. Like talking to you guys like this is really simple because you know, I know everybody who comes on here, and we're kind of having similar conversations and similar topics, and we exchange ideas. Doing corporate presentations in a COVID world is really weird because you're talking to your laptop and then there's a whole bunch of people that you don't know. So I find myself feeling way more nervous talking to a screen than I do if I was talking to 200 people in a company meeting, because I can see who they are and there's like a human interaction, and you know, you say something and you get to watch somebody's expression. But it's that fear, whether it's, even if I was public speaking and there was 200 people there, I'll always feel anxious just before I speak, the same way as I do if I'm speaking online. But that anxiety is good. That little bit of tension is good because that just makes you hyper-focused so that you're thinking, okay, I need to do this well. I need to show up. If you were like super relaxed, then it doesn't necessarily lead to you delivering a good presentation. So I totally agree with you on that, John. But when you also then think about like extreme things that we would do, and I've done quite a lot of them, and the difference in what I'm saying about, you know, a daily meditation practice or a daily cold shower, or a daily swim in cold water, is when you teach the body all of the time, every day, I show up for fear, see it coming, I step into it, I go through it, and it's not that bad. What you're actually trying to create is a sense of understanding around how I will embrace catastrophizing, because when catastrophizing comes, what tends to happen is it arrives and we think, oh my God, I don't even go there. That's just going to be the worst thing ever. And this could happen and that could happen and the other thing could happen. And we don't actually do anything. It's indecision. So within the fight, flight, and freeze, catastrophizing is freeze. I'm not going to do anything. I'm neither going to move forward or backwards. I'm going to stay here and just worry about what's happening. So the priming of fear is when I'm here, I'm going to actually go through my catastrophizing list. I'm going to write out 4 of them and I'm going to go to the source of one of them. And that can be, I really think right now that there's a good possibility that my boss is thinking that he should let me go. And if that happens, all these things are going to go wrong. So we would say, embrace that fear. So we'd say, let's think about it differently. Why don't I just go towards my boss and say, hey, Adam, Tom, Julie, wherever you are, things aren't going so well at the moment. The world's in a bit of a difficult place. Just want to get a sense of what you think is happening with my role and where we are and how the business is going. Because they're not the things that we do. We actually think, oh, I better not say anything. I'll just keep it to myself. And when you keep it to yourself, you're frozen. And when you're frozen, all that keeps happening is it's kind of like regurgitating the same problem. You know, in legal terms, you call it an asked and answered question. You haven't really asked anybody the question. You've asked it in your own head and you've answered it in your own head. And my job could be in jeopardy. Probably is. I'd say they're definitely thinking that they should get rid of me. There's too much insecurity in the business right now. So we go through that, freeze, catastrophize, and don't do it. So the stepping into fear is the preparation of our mind and our bodies to say, what's it look like or what's it feel like if I embrace the fear, if I actually just move towards it, which is never easy, but it's an interesting way to go. There's a guy who writes about anxiety attacks, Barry McDonough, I think his name is. Oh yeah, his book is called Dare, D-A-R-E, Dare. And Barry's whole idea around anxiety attacks is when they come, go right inside them. So when the anxiety comes and you're hyperventilating, instead of trying to get away from it, instead of trying to use, like if you're in therapy and you would go with cognitive behavior therapy, they'll say to you, here are some pleasant thoughts to try and get around the stress of the anxiety. He says, step into it, which is very much a Buddhist philosophy. And he's built his beliefs around what Viktor Frankl wrote about in his fantastic book, Man's Search for Meaning. So it's rather than me trying to get away from it, how about I step into it? So Barry McDonough started writing about this. So what he actually learned was Viktor Frankl's approach worked, but Viktor Frankl's approach wasn't new, and there's no new ideas. If you go back to Buddhist teachings 2,500 years ago, it is, I will embrace the fear, I will step into it, and I will own it, and through ownership, I start to reframe my relationship with the anxiety. So the catastrophizing brings on panic attacks. So it's not unusual to catastrophize. And the more you catastrophize, as the days and the weeks and the months go on, and John, you went out and you got help and you've done so well in your journey there. And a lot of times before people get help, then it comes into panic attacks because the body is screaming at you saying, you got to do something here. This is just not working. So we catastrophize, we regurgitate, we ask and answer the same question over and over again, and the body gets consumed in anxiety, and then boom, the panic attack comes. So you step into the fear and you say, let's have a look at this panic attack. And in Barry's work, he advocates that when the panic attack comes, you say to yourself, okay, give me the worst panic attack you can possibly bring now. Like really bring it on, because the body feels like it's going to die. But actually, if you're in a panic attack, it's pretty unlikely that you're going to have any major impact from the body. So he actually says, step towards the pain. And so that brings me just on to the whole idea of the teachings in Yamabushi. So for those of you who don't know anything about Yamabushi is a tradition that goes back 1,800 years. So it's not as old as Buddhism, which is 2,500 years. But the Yamabushi are a very interesting lineage within Buddhism. So within the lineage of Buddhism, there is called Shintoism, and within Shintoism, there is the Yamabushi. The Yamabushi are generally in two parts of Japan. They're in Kyoto in the north, and they're in Shunai, which is kind of northwest. Shunai is one of the most obscure, remote areas of Japan, and it's the last bastion of the samurai. And Shunai was the place that held out against the imperialist changes in Japan in the late 19th and early 20th century. And the Yamabushi is very interesting because there's no written texts in the way that they teach it. So within Buddhism, there are numerous volumes of detailed text and scriptures, not unlike most other religions. But the Yamabushi believe that everything should be experienced and communicated through nature. So within their shrines, they're in sacred mountains, and to be trained and to understand the way of Yamabushi, you have to experience it. So there's no way of just reading about it, you have to experience it. And when I did my master training, my teacher, Master Hanai, is he's 12th generation Yamabushi. So he could trace his lineage back nearly 1,000 years. And he had learned from his master, who learned from his master, who learned from his master. And it was all communicated in the mountains. It was all communicated in hands-on learning and experience. But within our master training, they push you into uncomfortable positions. So it starts off with you first of all arriving, and you're not allowed to speak to anybody. So you're in this really remote place. There's only 2 hotels that you can stay in, so it's pretty certain that somebody else is on your course is in the hotel. So you're told if you see anybody, or you believe that somebody might be also on Yamabushi training, you must not speak to them, you must not know their name, you must not get in any way acquainted with them. We then arrive to a meeting point at a train station. One of the monks is waiting for us, and when we arrive, they'll greet us, and he then says, please do not speak to anybody else that arrives. Do not convey your name. Do not talk about yourself. So a group of people gather. There was 7 of us, and then we head off on the bus for an hour. So on the bus, on the hour, the monk turns around and goes, you can share some pleasantries very discreetly. We'd really ask you not to speak, but you're not allowed to say what country you come from. You're not allowed to give your own name. You're not allowed to do anything else. So really, you kind of just sit there feeling pretty uncomfortable, and you head off, and you arrive at a Zen Buddhist temple, where you spend the day whilst they start to condition you to get ready for the experience. You're then fasting, so you're going to spend the next 5 days doing an awful lot of physical activity, extreme physical activity. And you will be fed as if you're in battle. So unlike mindful eating, when the Yamabushi are in master training, you will in the morning time wait for the master to be prepared to eat, and everybody will be given just their food, which is like a rice bowl, probably about that size, and a small little serving of miso soup and some water. That's all you're going to have till, if you're lucky, maybe 8 o'clock that night, maybe 10 o'clock that night. And it's consumed by just waiting for the master to eat his, and he will just go boom, 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 all very ceremonial. And then everybody has to do that the same really quickly. And then you instantly tidy everything up in a very orderly fashion, and you put it away. Then you line up in military fashion. So the Yamabushi are very much connected to the samurai, although they're the spiritual side of the samurai lineage. But what we do then is we're going into this idea of conditioning. So once we go into the whole idea of conditioning, we're all dressed in very traditional clothing. And to give you an example, I think day 1, trying to get the headscarf right. You've got to tie all these things together every morning. It's just a pain in the neck even getting ready. But I kept getting the headscarf wrong. So one of the monks is like in my face, shouting at me, saying, "Get the headscarf, get it again, do it again, do it again." You're like, "Oh man, okay, I'm doing it again, I'm doing it again." And fear is like pumping through your body. And I'm standing there looking at this guy going, I really want to just tell him to screw himself. And I just want to get an Uber and get the hell out of here. But I'm supposed to be here for this experience, so I keep doing it. But the more he shouts at me, the more difficult it is for me to do it. But then I eventually get it tied, and okay, I'm ready. So that's your first morning. The night before, you've slept on a floor in a traditional little old Japanese house, with animals like literally cats and hens and stuff walking through the room. You don't get a pillow, you don't get a duvet, and there's a room that's maybe it's kind of 15 by 15 foot, and there's 7 of us trying to find a space to sleep, and you've got people sleeping around you, and that's it. So it's the most basic possible conditions you could imagine. Then you're off hiking off into the mountains. Oh, most importantly, before you do anything else, like the first thing that they do when you arrive at the house is they take your watch and they take your phone. So you're not allowed to know what time it is, and you're not allowed to communicate with the outside world. Because they're going to wake you up at all times. They're going to wake you up at 3 o'clock in the morning. They're going to wake you up at 4 o'clock in the morning. They're going to have you out all day, and you think it's ready time for bed, and then they're going to get you up and they're going to march you out again at 11 o'clock at night. And by the way, this is spiritual training. Okay, so this isn't like martial arts training. This is spiritual training. So we're actually training to better understand our capacity to connect to Buddhism within nature. And the key principle is there is suffering in the world and there's an end to suffering. And we're learning how to find the end to suffering. But to get there, we're suffering. So the whole process is hard, and we will hike for like 4 hours, 5 hours up the third highest mountain in Japan, which is pretty damn high. You get up to the top, you have to meditate in cold water, which is coming off snow-capped mountains. It's ridiculously cold. But you can't really complain, because the person who is tap dancing up the mountain is our master, who is 74 years of age and has the playfulness and speed of an 11-year-old child. Now, he's not pleasant to us, but as you watch him moving, he's just tapping along one foot to the next, jumping from rocks, and you're trying to follow him up. But we go through this, we're pushed through this whole process and this whole stress environment. And many, many things happen. You know, you sign all kinds of disclaimers when you get there, and you think, oh, this is kind of, you know, just extreme, right? None of this will really happen. But on the first night, we'd been hiking for hours. We came back, we had to pray for an hour, then we had to meditate for an hour, then we had to pray again. This is all on your knees, moving from your knees into half lotus position, back to your knees again. Then you think, okay, I'm going to sleep now, I'm so tired. And they go, okay, we're now going out hiking into the forest in the dark. So they bring these little Japanese lanterns with just a little candle inside, and we go into the dark, into the lower forest, but still moving up into the mountain. So you can't really see a thing. We're all in complete silence, which, by the way, you're not allowed to talk at all. So you're not allowed to talk at night, you're not allowed to talk in the day, you're not allowed to speak. If any of your colleagues are hurt, or fall, or struggle, or emotionally struggle, you leave them. We're not allowed to touch them, talk them, reach out a hand. Everybody is left so that they can face whatever is within them and try and come through that fear. So in extreme times, like at one stage, I fell into a hole on the way down a mountain when there was an end of a tornado, and a typhoon, and the hole was about 5 foot deep, and I strained my ankle when I went in, and like literally head first, nearly drowning, trying to pull my way out. And as I'm kind of pulling my way out, I see my other colleagues all dressed as Yamabushi and the monks just all run past me, and everybody kind of like glances in and looks down, and I'm kind of clambering my way out with a bust ankle. And now I realize why we have all these straps all around our body, because we have to take them off at times and get myself ready to continue on down the mountain. And it's the end of a typhoon. Nobody can save me. There's no helicopters coming up there. I have to get my own way down, or I face death. It's pretty simple. So it's fear in its extreme. But the first night, when we've been through this horrible experience, we then get marched into this forest, and we're marching for 45 minutes or an hour. And then somebody says something up the front, and we can't hear what they're saying, but everybody stops. And of course, we're in a perfect line, and nobody steps out of line, and we're all carrying a stick that we use to walk with, and we wait. We can hear the master at the very front saying something in Japanese to the monk at the back, and then he says to us in English, pass the light up to the master. So the light is being passed up, and it's like typical Japanese lantern with candles, so it's only throwing light very close by. So as it moves up, we start to see like some kind of strange thing in front of us in a shape, and it gets to the very top person at the front, and we realize that standing in front of the master, who is probably about 5 foot, is a black bear who is probably 10 foot tall, standing up with his paws up, just growling. And all of a sudden the light goes on him, and it's like, holy shit. Like, you cannot believe that this thing is standing, you know, I don't know, 3 meters away. But nobody's allowed to say anything. And we've all been conditioned hard. Don't speak, don't react. So everybody kind of goes, okay. And the light is now there. The bear is growling at the master, but not like really having a go at him. But, you know, if it just kind of even leaned towards him, it'd flatten him like a pancake. And he reaches into his little jacket in his traditional Yamabushi clothes. we're thinking he's going to take out some kind of weapon now. We're all safe. And he takes out a bell. And he holds the bell up and he rings the bell. He goes, ding-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling. And the bear kind of looks at him, looks at the bell, moves his legs back, drops down to the ground, and walks off into the forest. And we were all like, that was the moment when we thought we were going to die, and off we go. So we go off and we continue on, and we do many other extreme things over the next 4 days, but we can't speak. And on the last day, when we've all come through the training, and thankfully everybody completed it. Two guys really struggled and nearly pulled out, but they made it through in the end. On the last day, and we have this lunch, and then they say, okay, now everybody can speak. And the first thing that came out of everybody's mouth, all of us just instantly looked at each other and went, holy shit, what about that bear? And it was just a great way to understand what fear is and what they were teaching you, which is, when you face fear, if you are just able to take a breath, wait, don't react. As Viktor Frankl says, it's the space between the stimulation and the response. So the bear arrives, we've all been told, don't move. And this isn't like a bear that the Yamabushi pay, like he's not like a theatrical bear who jumps out. This was just coincidence that we come across him because we're in an area proliferated with black bears. But we learned a really valuable lesson, the non-reactive nature of ourselves, looking at the fear and then waiting, taking a breath before react, showed us that the fear passes. If we all had reacted, the bear would have lashed out and inevitably would have killed one of us. And the last thing I'll just tell you about the Yamabushi, which is funny, every night when you finish all these extreme things, you then go into this tiny little pokey room and another little outhouse. And the room is so tight, you kind of get in and everybody has to sit there either on your knees or in half lotus position. And they start reading out some Buddhist prayers, and everybody starts repeating them, and they light a little fire in the center of the room, which is all these twigs and horrible things that once they start burning, it's this toxic smoke, and you're coughing your brains out. And you have to stay in the room until such time as you can no longer breathe, and then you get down on the ground and you crawl out under the smoke and you leave. And everybody stays to try and stay in as long as possible, and then we crawl out. And again, that's so the reason for that is that they're teaching us what hell feels like. It's painful and it's horrible. And, if you don't do your practice, then you're in hell. But they also are really also teaching you that when you are facing difficulty, it's not the immediate moment that you need to leave. There's a time between when you start to feel that really unpleasantness, and then there's an opportunity to leave. So at all times, you're staying with fear a little bit longer. You're just conditioning the body. And I know that all sounds very extreme, but you could do exactly the same thing by having a cold shower in the morning, because your body will still go, I don't want to do this. Cold water will hit your body. You won't like it for the 3 or 4 minutes when you're in there. And ideally, if you can stay in for 4 minutes, that's when you actually start to trigger your nervous system to switch, to notice that everything is okay and you've survived it. But it's the whole idea of building up the capacity to embrace fear that creates the freedom. Space between the stimulation and the response is where you will find your freedom. As Viktor Frankl very cleverly demonstrated by surviving the Holocaust in a concentration camp after losing his parents. So I've rabbited on a lot about fear, longer than I thought I would, but anybody have any questions or have anything to add to that?
Justin, you just brought back a memory to me. So do you remember a doctor called Dr. Anya Tuberty by any chance?
Yeah.
So I was taking massive panic attacks years ago, and I had gone to see this was it the CBT? I can't remember, but I'd gone to see this therapist or whatever, or a counselor about it. And I just remember thinking, I don't know, like whatever she was saying, like I understood it. It wasn't like I wasn't taking it in, it just wasn't doing anything. And I came across Anya Tuberty and I got her book, and I actually did get to see her. I went to one of her seminars. It was brilliant out in Dunleary. And it was funny because that was probably about 10 years ago. And it's not that I haven't taken a panic attack since, I have, but I used to have a fear of them, like a fear of taking a panic attack. And I had said it to her, I was like, I just have this, whatever. And she was the first person who ever said to me, will it on? Because I used to say to her, I used to run along Clontarf all the time, and I used to have this fear that like I'd be running and I'd be out of breath and I'd start panicking. But I used to love running. And she had said to me, well, what's the worst that'll happen? And I was like, well, I'll take a panic attack. And she was like, yeah. And I was like, oh, yeah, okay, that makes sense. But like, I'm not joking. Like, that's about 10 years ago. And I have not had a panic attack since, after hearing her saying that. I don't know what it was. It just resonated in my head. And as soon as I feel it coming on now, I would will it on. I'd almost say, right, come on. But like, what's the worst you can do? And it's like my body goes, oh, she doesn't care anymore. It just like deflates.
Yeah.
It was amazing. It was just so powerful.
It's brilliant, and yeah, you know, I've read her work as well, and it's fantastic, and it is that whole idea of like, obviously if you're flying a plane or something, you get a panic attack, there may be consequences, but for like most of us, when we get a panic attack, there are no real consequences. And you know, I had an extreme panic attack. I only ever had one panic attack in my life. I had this really extreme panic attack, super important meeting where I had to close the deal. And I had clients in from the US and Australia sitting in my boardroom, and I needed to close the deal. I had a panic attack that went on for about half an hour, 35 minutes. I lost my peripheral vision. I thought I'm having a heart attack or a stroke, but I needed to close the deal, and I was a driven lunatic. So I thought, I'll just stay in it. Even if it's a heart attack or a stroke, it doesn't matter, because I need to get this deal closed, so it'll be fine. I'll figure out how I'm going to recover from that later. If I need an ambulance, I'll call one. So I actually just leaned into the extreme nature of the panic attack. So it meant my relationship with panic attacks then was great, because I thought, well, that doesn't actually kill me.
A bit extreme, but yeah.
It's a very extreme approach. I'm not advocating that as a way for anybody to behave, but I was a bit of an extreme lunatic at that moment. But it's the same principle, and that is like a panic attack. So what's important is you have a panic attack and you lean into it, okay? And you go, bring it on, whatever you can do, make it happen, and I'll make it through it. And then you realize, actually, it's okay, I can get through it. But what you still need to do then is to say, why am I having a panic attack? So there's still work then behind. I've obviously got extreme anxiety or unresolved issues and stress that I haven't dealt with that bring me the panic attack. So I've learned now that the panic attack doesn't kill me, but now I'll go and have a look at why was I getting them in the first place. And did you then go on an exploration around that, Claudia?
Yeah, so the CBT counselor was really cool, because she was kind of explaining a little bit about what panic attack, because when I first took one, I was quite young and I didn't understand what was happening to me. And what it actually turned out was my dad passed away when I was really, really young, and I was at his funeral, but I have no memory of his funeral. Like, I don't remember any of it. And what happened was I was in a church, I can't remember, and I got a memory of it. It just came out of nowhere. And all of a sudden I felt like I was back in the church from a memory that I had lost for like 15 years. And I absolutely lost it. Like, I passed out and everything. Like, I had to be carried out of the church. Didn't understand what was going on. And that was the start of it. And it kept happening every time I'd be in like an enclosed space.
Yeah.
Like, so much so, like I stopped traveling for about 2 years because I didn't want to be on a plane. And it was insane. But in fairness now, I got an absolutely brilliant counsellor who really helped. And that Anya Tuberty was, I think, the making of it as well. Yeah.
And I think, you know, one reservation I have around CBT is that at times the therapists can say, when you have a panic attack, think of something nice so that you can have a panic attack, right? I have a problem with some Western counselling, whereby we keep telling people to navigate around their problems all the time. It's a very convenient way for therapists to always be employed by their clients to sustain the need to tell them how to navigate the problem. Because if I tell you to navigate your problem, and we do that in therapy and you feel great, and then you stop coming to therapy and the problem arises, and it's like 6 months since your last therapy session, people end up going back into the state of anxiety and stress. And then they think, how do I fix this? Oh yeah, I need to go back to my therapist. So CBT at times can be, circumvent. I'm not saying all therapists work like that, but what we advocate in the whole idea of Buddhist psychology is don't circumvent. Go in. Like, why am I having this panic attack? What am I fearful of? Like, what is the trigger? And when I explore it, like in the meditation, tension or the pain, notice it in your shoulder, move towards it, rest within it, breathe. Going into whatever the trauma is. And, we use this same technique even for people who've suffered from sexual abuse, whether it's as an adult or even as a child, which is one of the most traumatic things that can happen to a human being in a human body. But if you constantly withdraw from it all the time and you don't want to go there, then you constantly force all this tension and pain into the body. And of course, it then explodes. So Dr. Gabor Mate has a great book on all of this kind of thing from a clinical perspective to show the science around it, called When the Body Says No. And it's like, just own what went wrong and learn from it and get inside it, and then you free yourself. But exactly as you discovered, like, what's the worst thing that a panic attack can do? It's if you're relatively healthy, and obviously if you're predisposed to heart conditions or anything else, you don't want to be leaning into panic attack, because it can actually trigger something like that. But for most people, it's not going to kill you.
Yeah.
So well done.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to come in or talk? Or
I've got two questions, actually. The first one is, why did you do the master training? Because I assume you already heard before that it was kind of horrible. So why? What was your purpose? And my second question is actually, it's not like it's like more, I have a real fear of darkness. Like, even in my house, when it's dark, I don't go anywhere. I always put on lights. And I know it's stupid. But do you kind of suggest that I should just go there and go into the dark and just see what happens?
Great questions. So why did I do the training? So I practice Buddhism already, but I found Yamabushi to be just incredible. I've always had a great affinity with nature, and they believe that everything that we need is available to us in the natural world. So I was really interested in learning more about that. I didn't realize how extreme it was going to be. There was two guys on my course with me who were, one of them was like an ex-military special forces dude who, he was the kind of guy that, you'd want to have protecting you at all times. And the other guy was like this extreme guy who lives off the grid type thing. So I realized all these people were extremely fit. And another one of the people on the course said to me, I've been planning to be with the Yamabushi since I was 7. So I realized everybody else knew an awful lot more about this than I did. So I had no idea how extreme it was going to be. But I did sign all the disclaimers, and I knew it was a risk to my life. And my wife at the time watched the video and she went, I think this is a lot more than you think it is. So I did it because I enjoy the challenge. I enjoy pushing myself. And I'd always done that in a business context in my old life. So I thought it would be interesting to challenge myself spiritually, a physical element to it. So that was my thinking. When I was there, I was thinking, what the hell did I do? And I had no idea how hard this was going to be. But actually, you know, I would go back again next year, and I've already been communicating with them to say I will go again. So, you know, like everything, it's horrible when you're doing it. It's even horrible for the weeks and months afterwards. But after a while, we forget all the horrible parts, and we just remember, well, there was some really nice parts that were fun. In the context of the dark idea, Julie, you know, it's funny when I lost my son. I grew up really fearful of the dark. So I had challenging issues with my parents when I was younger, and my dad was really unwell, and really difficult times around dark. So I was petrified about being on my own and being in the dark, right? And I was this kind of like macho alpha male capitalist living this life in London, but I had to kind of still hide the fact that I don't really like the dark. So I lived on my own, and I'd always kind of leave a light on around the place, but wouldn't sleep completely in the dark. And I remember when Joshua died, it was probably a year later. I was at a party in a friend's house, and at this stage we lived in a really remote area in the mountains, and my house was about an hour's walk from his house. And at about 1:30 in the morning, there was an argument going on with his wife, and I thought, oh, I can't be bothered dealing with this. I'm going to walk home. So I decided to walk home in the pitch dark. And it was fine as I left where his house was, and there was light and everything else. But then I was in the mountains in the darkness, and it's like a darkness that is all consuming. You literally cannot see anything around you. And it was a really unpleasant experience. But as I started to walk into it, and I felt a bit of fear, I then thought, you know what am I afraid of? Like, am I afraid of like ghosts or demons or something evil? So then I just started talking to my son, and I said to Joshua, you know, if you're there, if there's something that I need to be fearful of, you're here, you're with me. And actually, I've seen some pretty horrible things in my life when I lost you. So whatever could materialize in this moment will never be as frightening as what I've been through. So I just kind of laughed at it and walked through the darkness for an hour, and actually fell when I was walking through the darkness, and I had my phone in my hand, and the battery ran out. So I had my phone in my hand, and I stood on the side of this ditch, and I fell, and I dropped my phone into a bush, and I couldn't see where it was because I had no light. So I had to take the belt off my trousers and tie it around a fence in the hope that when we drive back the next day, I'd go really slowly and I would see the belt, and then we could go and find my phone, which we found the next day. But my wife and my son were laughing their heads off going, how dark was it? And I was going, that is how dark it was. All I could do was hope that I could tie this thing. And I knew that if I just stayed on this road without falling into any more of these ditches, that I would eventually get back to our house. So I've been there, so I would suggest, you know, take a night and you know, really challenge yourself when there's nobody else in the house. Like if everybody else is away, and you can be on your own and just be in the darkness, and you'll realize that when you sit with it and you just kind of say, well, whatever is the worst thing that can happen, bring it on. Like the panic attack, like, oh yeah, panic attack, bring it on. You start to notice, I'm bigger than this, I'm stronger than this, and I can get through it.
Okay, I try. I'm already getting like a panic attack now, I think.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's not. I'm not saying that it's easy, not at all. And like even practicing meditation, I always say as a teacher, I'll say to people, you know, this isn't easy. You know, we're trying to cultivate this idea of sitting and being with ourselves. It's so difficult because we always want to distract, get away from it. So stepping into your fear is hugely, hugely challenging. But you know, fear of flying or fear of spiders or fear of anything, how's it cured? Like like being part of what it is that you're fearful of, and then you realize, oh, it's not that bad.
Okay, thank you.
Pleasure. So what time is it?
Yeah, hi Justin. Yeah, when you mentioned spiders, I'm terrified of spiders, the big spiders, and I'm moving back to Ireland next month, I think, and I know in August, September is when the big house spiders start looking for their mates or something. So actually that is what I'm scared of. So now I'm just going to take a little breath between seeing the big spider and running. So hopefully I won't run. But anyway, it's been very helpful. I've got some tips tonight, so I'm going to try and relax. If I see a spider, I hope I don't, but I'm expecting to see one.
Yeah, well, you know, exactly, you're right. That is the time of year when they come here. And, you know, the breath, like it's always the breath. You know, take a moment and breathe and then decide what you're going to do. So in our house, when there's spiders, I'm called in because the other two will kill flies, they'll kill spiders. As a Buddhist, I believe that all sentient beings have a right to life, so I won't kill anything. So I'm the person who goes around, and no matter how horrible they are, I'm kind of picking them up and putting them in some kind of vehicle to get them out of the house. But you know, they're not pleasant. My wife is fearful of them. She lived in Mauritius for 10 years, where you know spiders can be bigger than you. So yeah, I get that. But again, it's the breath is that moment, because fear arrives. I see the spider. My inclination always when I see the spider is I run away. So when you actually see it and you go, okay, I'll watch it for a second, and actually I'm starting to realize that, you know, it hasn't got the capacity to leap at me and jump on my face. It's really just kind of gonna swirl around the drain and disappear. But we have all these preconceived ideas, and that's where the fear center comes in. But it's also important to know fear is this negative bias. You know, when we're always looking for something that might kill us. This is all about why the human race survives. And last year we did a house swap, and we spent 6 weeks in California, and I was running every day on the trails in San Francisco. So we'd go out to the back of our house and these beautiful trails that would go off into the mountains. And of course there's rattlesnakes and tarantulas and all these kind of things. So when I'd be running, every time I'd see a bit of rope or a bit of hose or something, I'd always see a snake. Now, if I'm running in the mountains in Wicklow, I'm never worried about seeing a snake. I never see one because I'm not fearful of it. So fear is there to bring this negative bias, so that you're always looking for the thing that might upset you, because the human being needs to survive. But actually, as I said at the very start, fortune favors the brave. So in business, people who become really successful realize, I just lean into fear and I step through it because I know everybody else will drop away. And then there's only 1% of the people left, because the 99% go, whoa, I'm not going there. So there we go. Fear is an exciting thing to be embraced. I'm really glad that we're doing this earlier now, because I can actually go to sleep at night. It's too late for me to have bright lights shining in my face. I've still got enough natural light that I can sit here without having to use the lamp. So unless anybody else wants to add anything, we'll wrap it up. No.
Thanks, Justin.
Pleasure. Thanks
Yeah,
very
it's
much.
been great. It's really good. I must say I do my own therapy sessions besides this, but I find this, I really look forward to it on the Tuesday night. It's very helpful.
Right. Really pleased. I'll find some other fun topic for us next week. And get the invite. All right, guys. Have a great week.
Cheers, Justin. Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Justin.
Bye.
Bye.